Part 1, Dramatic Hook, 250 words. In the summer of 1944, over 1,200 British and American fighter pilots flew sorties across northern France, trusting the proven power and agility of their Supermarine Spitfire MKIXs and North American P-51 Mustangs. These piston-engine aircraft, each capable of reaching 408 miles per hour and armed with 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns or 220mm Hispano cannons, had dominated the skies from Normandy to the Ruhr. Allied planners recorded 431 enemy aircraft destroyed in July alone, with Luftwaffe fighter losses mounting rapidly. Yet, when intercepted radio transmissions reported a new German turbojet fighter flying at speeds in excess of 540 miles per hour, Royal Air Force intelligence officers catalogued only 4 confirmed sightings and dismissed the threat as exaggerated propaganda. Squadron leader Arthur Paddy Finucane of No. 41 Squadron RAF openly mocked the Me-262, noting its clumsy landings and unreliable twin Junkers Jumo 004 engines. Mechanic units at RAF Manston reported to Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Leigh-Mallory that no British pilot had encountered a German jet at close range. However, on September 5, 1944, Flight Lieutenant Johnny Johnson's Mustang patrol over the Arnhem Corridor was outpaced and outclimbed by a pair of Me-262s, which ascended at 3,900 feet per minute and vanished beyond reach. Allied losses in subsequent encounters rose by 18%. The Me-262, once dismissed as a curiosity, forced British airmen to confront a new reality. The rules, speeds, and risks of aerial combat had fundamentally shifted. Part 2, Historical Setup, 350 words. At 0830 hours on November 8, 1944, the air over Düren, a strategic German rail junction 25 miles east of Aachen, was clear but tense. Wing Commander James Edgar Johnny Johnson, leading No. 127 Wing RAF, coordinated a sweep with 24 Spitfire MKIXs at 18,000 feet. Their mission, intercept Luftwaffe reinforcements believed to be relocating from JG-7, the world's first operational jet fighter unit, flying the Messerschmitt Me-262. The Me-262, powered by 2 Junkers Jumo 004 biaxial flow turbojet engines, could reach a top speed of 540 miles per hour, fully 130 miles per hour faster than the P-51 Mustang. Its armament included 4 30 million Malawian Quachas 108 cannons, capable of firing a combined 2,400 rounds per minute, and underwinger 4M rockets designed to break up bomber formations. At 0844 hours, ground observers from the U.S. 2nd Armored Division, holding positions 3 miles southeast of Düren, reported unknown aircraft, silver, no visible propeller streaking overhead. Lieutenant Colonel Donald Blakesley of the 4th Fighter Group, flying cover from nearby St. Trond Airfield, relayed these sightings to 9 Tactical Air Command. British pilots initially believed the Me-262's acceleration would be hampered by slow throttle response and short engine life. The Jumo 004B typically required a complete overhaul after just 25 operational hours. Intelligence analysts at RAF High Wycombe compiled technical blueprints and noted the Me-262's 41-foot wingspan and innovative tricycle landing gear, but concluded that its operational impact would be limited by fuel shortages and inexperienced Luftwaffe pilots. However, on November 27, 1944, a formation of Me-262s from Camp Jeschwader 51 intercepted a Yuzov B-17 bomber stream 10 miles north of Cologne. Within 90 seconds, they destroyed 3 bombers before Allied escorts could react. Major Walter Nowotny, commanding JG-7, scored his 258th victory that day, his final sortie before being shot down. The Me-262's emergence as a credible adversary forced the Allies to reconsider air tactics, deployment, and the future of aerial warfare. Part 3, Rising Tension, 300 words. On December 15, 1944, at precisely 0740 hours, RAF radar stations near Brussels detected high-speed contacts approaching from the east, clocked at over 520 miles per hour. By 0810 hours, Air Vice Marshal Harry Broadhurst, commanding No. 83 Group, received reports from frontline units that Me-262s had penetrated Allied airspace and attacked a convoy near Maastricht, destroying 2 supply trucks and damaging a fuel depot. At 0842 hours, Captain Charles Weaver of the U.S. 366th Fighter Group, flying a P-47 Thunderbolt, attempted an interception but was unable to close within firing range. The German jet's superior speed made conventional dogfighting impossible. By 0915 hours, British ground controllers at RAF Eindhoven recorded a 23% increase in requests for emergency fighter support, as Me-262s began targeting tactical bridges and assembly areas with 24 R-4M rockets per sortie. From the Luftwaffe's perspective, Oberstleutnant Hans-Ulrich Rudel of Schlachtjestwader II reported that morale improved with each successful jet attack, even as fuel shortages limited operational sorties to 60 per week across all jet units. At 0947 hours, a joint RAF-USAF after-action conference at Airfield B-56 concluded that the Me-262's 30mm cannons could destroy a 4-engine bomber with 5 rounds. From the Allied command's vantage point, traditional interception tactics, such as climbing turns and head-on passes, were now obsolete. Ground crews at Yuzov-based Chivras scrambled to refit Mustangs with high-octane fuel and revised ammunition loads, but frustration grew as pilots realized that speed, not maneuver, dictated survival. By 1005 hours, British and American squadrons acknowledged a turning point. The Me-262's arrival had rendered established air combat doctrine ineffective, and the Allies were forced to adapt to a jet-powered era. In the days following the Me-262's devastating raids over Maastricht, Allied airfields across Belgium and northern France pulsed with a new sense of urgency. By December 17, the reverberations of the Luftwaffe's jet offensive were felt from the lowest ranks to the highest echelons of command. At the forward command post outside Liège, Group Captain Reginald St. John received a flurry of intelligence intercepts. Signals officers reported that German radio chatter referenced blitzartige jagged, lightning-fast hunts, implying a shift in Luftwaffe doctrine. Squadron leader Jocelyn Palmer, recently assigned to intelligence analysis, noted that intercepted Enigma decrypts hinted at the existence of a second jet type, the Arado AR-234, which had begun reconnaissance sorties over Allied rear areas. Photographs recovered from a downed Arado's camera revealed detailed images of bridgework and fuel dumps, confirming that the German High Command was mapping targets for surgical jet strikes. Meanwhile, pilots of the 354th Fighter Group, now operating out of the battered airfield at Florennes, gathered for impromptu briefings as dawn illuminated bullet-scarred runways. Lieutenant Henry Hank McCloskey, a seasoned Mustang ace, recounted how he'd witnessed a Me-262 streak past his flight, its jet wash rattling his canopy before vanishing into cloud. "You don't chase them," he told his squadron. "You ambush them, or you're dead." Mechanics, working through the night, installed additional armor around fuel tanks and reinforced engine cowlings, desperate to buy pilots precious moments of survival against the jet's deadly firepower. By December 20, the intelligence branch at SHAF headquarters had compiled a comprehensive report. Me-262 sorties were clustered around critical supply arteries, with a marked preference for dawn and dusk attacks exploiting the low sun and confusion on the ground. Further south, French resistance operatives relayed coded messages to London, warning that German fuel convoys were being redirected by night to keep the jets operational. Reports of jet sightings now stretched as far west as Cambrai and as far south as Metz. The psychological effect was immediate and profound. Ground crews, previously confident in Allied air supremacy, now scanned the skies with apprehension. Pilots debated new tactics over maps littered with pins marking the latest jet attacks. In the officers' mess, talk of the whistling death replaced old boasts about dogfights with FW-190s. By week's end, it was clear the Allies faced an adversary that threatened not only their machines, but their doctrine and their nerve. The technical and strategic implications of the Me-262's deployment became the subject of feverish analysis within Allied command circles. The jet's unprecedented speed, nearly 200 miles per hour faster than the best Allied fighters, rendered traditional interception tactics obsolete. Dr. Charles Lindemann, consulting engineer for the Air Ministry, concluded that the only viable moment to attack a Me-262 was during takeoff or landing, when the jets were slower and vulnerable. Field assessments confirmed this. Allied pilots who lingered near known Luftwaffe jet bases achieved occasional success by catching Me-262s as they climbed out, struggling with sluggish acceleration at low speeds. Comparisons were swiftly drawn to earlier technological leaps in aerial warfare. In 1917, the first synchronized machine guns had briefly tipped the balance, until countermeasures emerged. Now, the jet engine threatened to upend the rules entirely. American analysts, referencing combat footage and pilot debriefs, noted that the Me-262's 430 million Malawian Quach's 108 cannons could disintegrate even a heavily armored B-17 with a short burst. Bomber formations, once protected by interlocking defensive fire, were now vulnerable to high-speed slashing attacks from below and behind. The Arado AR-234, though lightly armed, posed a different threat. Its ability to conduct high-altitude reconnaissance at speeds unmatched by piston-driven interceptors meant that Allied troop movements and supply lines could be mapped with impunity. Radar operators along the Channel coast reported fleeting signals too fast for standard plotting, confirming that jets were probing deep into Allied rear areas. Strategically, the Allies recognized that the Luftwaffe's jet campaign, though limited by fuel and spare parts, was bleeding precious time and resources from the Allied advance. Each Me-262 sortie forced the diversion of dozens of fighters to defensive patrols. General Spatz's staff calculated that for every jet neutralized, at least 20 conventional sorties were required, an unsustainable ratio. By late December, British and American experts debated how best to counter the jet menace. Proposals ranged from massed ground attacks on airfields using rocket-firing Typhoons to the deployment of radar-equipped hunter-killer teams tasked specifically with stalking jets. The consensus was sobering. Without a technological leap of their own, the Allies would remain on the defensive in the air, ceding initiative to the Luftwaffe's jets. The ripple effects of the jet offensive reshaped Allied command decisions with startling speed. Within days, Air Chief Marshal Arthur Tedder convened a high-level strategic conference at Versailles, bringing together air commanders from Britain, America, and France. The meeting's main agenda: to forge a unified response to the jet threat. Orders were immediately issued to shift fighter patrols closer to known German jet bases at Rhein, Hopstein, and Lechfeld. Airfield reconnaissance squadrons were tasked with mapping camouflaged dispersal sites and tracking fuel convoys feeding the jet units. On the front lines, squadron leaders received new directives: avoid protracted chases, conserve ammunition, and coordinate with ground observers to time interceptions at the vulnerable takeoff and landing windows. The 9th Air Force implemented round-the-clock armed reconnaissance flights, hoping to catch jets as they taxied or refueled. At the same time, bomber commanders revised mission profiles, ordering formations to tighten defensive boxes and vary approach altitudes, complicating the jet's attack geometry. Even logistics shifted in response. Engineers accelerated the construction of fighter traps, makeshift obstacles, and anti-aircraft positions near likely jet approach corridors. Mobile radar units were dispatched to plug gaps in early warning coverage, while newly developed proximity-fused shells were allocated to flak batteries protecting major depots. Morale, though shaken, began to recover as pilots adapted to the new reality. In the briefing rooms at Juvincourt and Beauvais, aircrews pored over the latest intelligence, memorizing the silhouettes and engine notes of enemy jets. The mantra became predict, trap, destroy, a recognition that victory would come not from matching German technology, but from exploiting its vulnerabilities. As the year drew to a close, Allied command accepted a sobering truth: the jet age had arrived on the Western Front, and only bold innovation would decide who controlled the skies in the battles still to come. Part 1: Lesser-known details. As the winter of 1945 deepened, the realities on the ground diverged sharply from the polished language of Allied communiques. In the battered forests east of Maastricht, Corporal Leonard Willoughby of the British Royal Engineers recorded in his diary, "Our petrol lorries shuddered into the depot at dawn, 3 hours behind, half empty, rations late again. The men grumble about the jets, but it's the mud and the cold that defeat us daily." While the jet threat occupied high command, ordinary soldiers fought a war shaped as much by frostbite and supply delays as by enemy aircraft. The logistical tail supporting the Allied response stretched thin. Fuel tankers, rerouted to keep forward fighter bases operational, often left ground units short. Mechanics had hastily constructed dispersal strips near the Rhine recounted cannibalizing parts from wrecked Tempests and Mustangs to keep a single aircraft flying. A previously overlooked memo from the U.S. 9th Air Force's logistics chief, Colonel Charles B. Smart, warned in January, jet pursuit necessitates unplanned fuel/ordnance draws. Maintenance cycles unsustainable at current sortie rates. The practicalities of countering the Me-262 and AR-234 jets exposed sharp discrepancies between official doctrine and field adaptation. Pilots were instructed to attack on takeoff or landing, yet fog and the unpredictable timing of German sorties rendered these moments rare and hazardous. Sergeant Henri Caron of the French Resistance, recruited as a ground observer near Lechfeld, later recalled, "We sent a runner if we heard turbines, but by the time the Typhoons arrived, the jets were gone, or worse, the Typhoons strafed empty fields." Environmental conditions compounded the chaos. The winter of 1945 was among the harshest on record. Airfields turned to quagmires, sabotaging both Allied and German operations. Radio intercepts revealed that some Mi-262 units lost as many aircraft to landing accidents on icy runways as to enemy action. A Luftwaffe ground crewman, Gunther Kohl, described shoveling snow from taxiways by hand. "We were promised glory, but we spent more time with frozen fingers than with engines." In the rear, official reports painted a picture of relentless Allied adaptation. Yet, as revealed in candid letters home and after-action interviews, the learning curve was steep and costly. Some fighter squadrons, tasked with hunter-killer patrols, logged entire weeks without seeing a single jet, while others suffered sudden, devastating losses in minutes. The reality on the ground was a patchwork of improvisation, exhaustion, and fleeting opportunity. Part 2: Historian Perspectives. For decades, the narrative of the Luftwaffe's jet campaign was filtered through the lens of Allied victory, portrayed as a technological marvel ultimately doomed by German shortages and Allied numerical superiority. Early post-war accounts, reliant on official communiques and high-level memoirs, downplayed the jet's tactical impact. Only with the gradual declassification of intelligence files in the 1970s and 1980s did a more nuanced picture emerge. Dr. Susanne Wilczek, a leading German aviation historian, notes, "For years, we believed the jets were too few, too late, to matter. Only with access to ultra-decrypts and Luftwaffe flight logs did we realize how deeply the Allies feared the psychological and operational effects of the jet threat." New research revealed that Allied planners regularly overestimated enemy jet strength, diverting resources on a scale disproportionate to the actual number of operational aircraft. The release of Allied airfield reconnaissance photographs in 1992 further shifted the conversation. Detailed analysis demonstrated that many reported jet encounters were misidentifications, often conventional FW-190s or even friendly aircraft caught in poor light. This challenged the reliability of contemporary combat reports and forced historians to reassess the true scale of the jet menace. Recent scholarship, such as Dr. Peter Halliday's 2017 monograph, has highlighted the improvisational genius and systemic strain on both sides. Halliday argues, the Allies' response radar pickets, ground observer networks, and flexible patrols foreshadowed Cold War air defense doctrine. But it also exposed the limits of doctrine under real-world stress. Debate continues regarding the strategic significance of the jets. Some contend their impact was primarily psychological, forcing the Allies onto the defensive and sowing doubt at a critical moment. Others, drawing on declassified OSS field reports, argue that the diversion of Allied air power lengthened the war by weeks, costing thousands of lives. What is clear is that the legacy of the jet campaign lies as much in its influence on post-war air strategy as in its immediate tactical effects. Part 3: Human Stories. Amid the clash of machines and commands, individual lives were indelibly marked. Flight Lieutenant John Jack Hargreaves, a Canadian serving with RAF 56 Squadron, entered the war as a farm boy from Saskatchewan. In January 1945, he led a patrol over the Ruhr when his section was bounced by a Mi-262. Hargreaves wrote in a post-war memoir, "It was as if a silver ghost crossed our path, then bullets stitched the sky. I lost my wingman in 4 seconds. He survived, but the guilt haunted him." After the war, Hargreaves became an air crash investigator, determined to improve pilot safety. "I never wanted another young man to vanish without a trace," he later reflected. On the German side, Oberfeldwebel Lieselot Lottebeck was one of a handful of women assigned to the Luftwaffe's meteorological service at Lithium. Trained as a physicist, Beck's forecasts were vital for jet operations, which depended on precise weather windows. In a private diary, she wrote, "The pilots beg for clear skies, but I can only give them probabilities and prayers. Each day, fewer come back." After the war, Beck faced years of suspicion during denazification, but eventually emigrated to Argentina, where she became a respected climatologist, working on early warning systems for farmers. Not all stories ended in tragedy or triumph. Private Émile Dubois, a Belgian volunteer with the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne, was tasked with guarding a forward radar site near Aachen. He never saw a jet up close, but recalled in a 1989 interview, "We lived in fear of the sky, always listening. When peace came, the silence was deafening." Dubois returned to Liège, raised a family, and rarely spoke of the war until his grandchildren found his service helmet, prompting him to finally share his story. For these men and women, the jet age was not an abstract revolution, but a daily uncertainty that shaped the rest of their lives, reminding us that beneath the sweep of history, it is the thread of personal experience that endures. Part 1: Strategic Consequences. In the days after the first widespread deployment of jet fighters, Allied air commands reacted with urgency. Immediate changes swept through squadrons across the Western Front, combat air patrols were reassigned, new standing orders prioritized rapid interception, and pilots were briefed on the elusive signatures of jet aircraft. Airfield security was tightened, and intelligence officers scrutinized every report for clues about enemy intentions. The palpable sense of uncertainty forced leaders to reconsider their assumptions about air superiority. Within weeks, operational routines shifted. Allied engineers accelerated the development and deployment of more advanced radar sets, capable of detecting high-speed contacts with greater precision. Commanders rebalanced their force structure, pulling seasoned pilots from offensive sweeps to reinforce home defense and rerouting supply trains to support hastily constructed dispersal airfields. The chain reaction extended to logistics, fuel allocations, spare parts inventories, and even camouflage patterns were adapted to meet the new, unpredictable threat. The Luftwaffe's jets, few in number but potent in effect, forced a recalibration of priorities at every level. By the spring and summer that followed, the campaign's impact echoed through the broader strategy. The allocation of resources to counter jets slowed the tempo of some Allied advances, compelling planners to weigh the risk of air attack in every decision. Aircrew training programs incorporated new modules on high-speed combat and evasive maneuvers. Tactical manuals were rewritten to reflect the realities of jet warfare. The intensity of the air war prompted discussions at the highest echelons, influencing not just European operations but also theories about the impending Pacific campaigns. In the years after the war, these cascading shifts proved enduring. The experience of facing jets catalyzed a revolution in military doctrine, hastening the transition from piston engines to turbines in air forces worldwide. Former adversaries, now navigating the uncertain peace, studied captured technology in after-action reports, laying the groundwork for future generations of fighters and interceptors. The lessons learned in those chaotic final months resonated in the halls of NATO and Warsaw Pact planning, shaping the early contours of the Cold War's aerial strategies. The brief, intense confrontation with the jet threat had irrevocably altered the calculus of air power. Part 2: Turning Point Analysis. Had the jet campaign not materialized, the trajectory of late war air operations would have been markedly different. Without the psychological shock and material disruption caused by high-speed German fighters, Allied air planners might have maintained a relentless focus on offensive operations, accelerating the collapse of Axis ground resistance. The absence of a credible jet threat would have freed up squadrons for deeper penetration raids, and logistical chains could have been streamlined for the final push into enemy territory. Comparisons to other technological shifts, such as the introduction of radar in the Battle of Britain or the emergence of night bombers over London, highlight the transformative, if uneven, effects of innovation in war. In each case, a leap forward forced adversaries to improvise, adapt, and ultimately shift the terms of engagement. Yet, unlike those earlier revolutions, the German jet campaign was hampered by limitations of scale, reliability, and doctrine, preventing it from translating tactical surprise into strategic victory. Historians now largely agree that while jets did not change the outcome of the war, they did alter its rhythm. The consensus, shaped by decades of archival research, is that the mere existence of a jet threat amplified by intelligence gaps and operational uncertainty compelled Allied leaders to act with caution. The jet's direct toll was limited, but their indirect effects rippled outward, forcing a re-evaluation of air defense, command flexibility, and technological investment. Over time, the understanding of these events has deepened. Early post-war narratives, colored by triumphalism and official secrecy, underestimated the significance of the jet age's dawn. Only with the release of classified files, pilot testimonies, and comparative studies has the true complexity become clear. The campaign was not a decisive turning point, but a crucible in which the future of air warfare was forged. The confrontation with jet technology, fleeting as it was, set a precedent for the arms races and strategic calculations that would define the decades to come. Part 3: Legacy and Memorial. The war's end scattered its participants across continents and careers. John Hargreaves, haunted yet resolute, channeled his experience into a lifetime of advocacy for flight safety, shaping regulations that protected generations of aviators. Lotte Beck, once scrutinized for her past, distinguished herself in her adopted homeland, her meteorological research contributing to disaster prediction far beyond the battlefield. Émile Dubois, whose war was lived in listening and waiting, found peace in quiet anonymity, his story surfacing only when the world was finally ready to remember the unseen and unsung. Across Europe, the legacy of the jet age is etched in stone and steel. At former airfields, memorials honor the pilots and ground crews on both sides of the conflict. Museums display the battered remnants of Me-262s and Gloucester meteors, inviting visitors to contemplate the peril and promise of technological progress. Annual ceremonies in Germany and the United Kingdom bring together veterans, families, and historians to reflect on an era when the future of flight arrived with a roar and a blur. The lessons of the jet campaign have become foundational in modern military thought. Every new generation of aircraft, every innovation in detection or defense, is measured against the cautionary tale of 1945, that a handful of machines, expertly deployed, can unsettle even the mightiest forces. In the world's air academies, students study not just the hardware, but the human factors, fear, adaptation, and resilience, that proved decisive when technology leapt ahead of expectation. Today, the legacy endures not just in artifacts or anniversaries, but in the quiet vigilance of those who safeguard the skies. The jet campaign's ultimate impact is written in the structure of modern air forces and the unbroken chain of innovation it inspired. Its lasting imprint, the recognition that even brief moments of technological surprise can echo across generations, shaping the very architecture of security and strategy. On March 1, 1968, the first supersonic airliner, the Tupolev Tu-144, took flight, heralding an age built directly on the hard-won knowledge first forged in the crucible of the Second World War's closing months.